Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to another video on philosophical challenging ideas that I think everyone should know. I talk about philosophy in almost all of my video. Today, I want to teach you something about philosophy itself. I want us to ask the question, what is philosophy? To start with, I want you to have this on the back of your mind. Philosophy gave birth to every other discipline that is studied in college, high school, or primary. Philosophy is the mother of all knowledge. So when you're studying philosophy, you're actually studying the real foundation of all of knowledge. So people normally think that philosophy is about those people who ask strange questions like what's reality, what's truth, what's existent. To some people, philosophy is just asking never-ending question and almost like being disruptive. But here's the irony. Every serious academic discipline you study today was born from philosophy. Mathematics was born in philosophy, physics was born in philosophy, biology was born in philosophy, economics, political science, psychology, sociology, all those subjects are children of philosophy. So to study philosophy is to study the foundation of all knowledge. And that's why you might find it difficult when discussing things with philosophers because they understand the foundation of almost all kind of knowledge, including derivative knowledges like public policy, think of anything, computer science. Philosophers have an understanding of the foundation of those knowledge. In fact, the highest academic degree in almost every field you study at the university is called a PhD for that reason. PhD means or stands for Doctor of Philosophy. It means that somewhat you've reached a level of knowledge where it's assumed that you understand philosophy, especially in area of your specialization. So even if your degree is in chemistry, engineering, or computer science, or law, that degree is given under the auspices of philosophy. So what exactly is philosophy? The word comes from two Greek words, philo, meaning love, or a translation for love in English, and sophia, a translation for wisdom in English. So philosophy literally, the way it's commonly known, is the love of wisdom. But philosophy is not merely about just love of the wisdom because maybe you're interested in knowing. It's not merely about opinion. It's a very disciplined attempt to think clearly about the deepest question human beings can ask in any field of study. It's interested in what's real, what really exists. How would we know what exists? And what are the limits of the method that we are using to know? When we know, how should we use that in our life? And it asks a deep question like, what's good? It asks questions like, since things are really confusing, the things that we know, what makes reasoning valid? To answer those questions, philosophy developed branches that helps us to answer the question of what's real, how do we know, what's good, and what makes reasoning valid. And these branches became the foundation of civilization's intellectual structure. The first branch is called metaphysics. Metaphysics asks most fundamental question of all, what is reality? In most of my video, you'll hear me talk about reality. Reality is understood from metaphysics. So there are those whose metaphysics says only ideas exist, and there are those whose metaphysics material is what exists. Those two different positions shape how we understand reality. Sometimes you are an idealist, you believe only ideas exist. Sometimes you are a materialist, but you don't even know that that's the school of ideas or of knowledge that you belong to from metaphysical understanding. So what does it mean? We could ask, what does it mean for something to exist? So for instance, is the mind different from the body? That's a question of metaphysics. Do we have free will? That's a question of metaphysics. Time. What is time? Time is something that we all use and talk about. But when you really think about time, what is it really made up of? There's something else that also is associated with the human being, and it's almost obvious, something called consciousness. But we don't know what consciousness is. So in metaphysics, we ask, what's consciousness? And we really struggle to try and understand what's consciousness. So before science could study the universe, human beings had to ask these questions, this kind of question, for us to give us even the kind of universe that we talk about. The second branch of philosophy is epistemology. Now, in epistemology, we ask, but even if reality exists, how do we know anything about that reality? In other words, what method would we use to know anything about that reality? That question is a question of epistemology. Epistemology studies knowledge. Epistemology is the theory of knowledge. We want to know how we can know that something is true or false, or something exists, and what is it that would count as evidence? What is it that would count as a fact? How can human beings be certain of anything, considering that we live in a world of probability, a world of uncertainty? In the age of social media, misinformation, propaganda, and artificial intelligence, epistemology may be more important than ever, because on social media, where there's a lot of misinformation, propaganda, and even in this time of deepfake, the question whether this way of knowing is certain or what is the limitation of it is really important, and that is epistemology. So epistemology is more important now than ever, because civilization collapses when people can no longer distinguish what is true from just opinion, what is factual, what is evident, what is a theory, what's law. If we can't use those words careful, then it will really cause chaos in how we discuss reality. The next branch of philosophy is called axiology. Human life is not just about truth, it's also about value. It's about the things that we consider to be good, to be beautiful, and worth pursuing. So this branch of philosophy that deals with what's good, what's beautiful, what's worth, what's meaningful, what should we focus our purpose on, that branch of philosophy is called axiology, the philosophy of value. And in axiology, there are two areas, ethics and aesthetics. So when you're thinking about ethics and aesthetics in philosophy, that's an area called axiology, the study or the philosophy of value. Let's look at ethics. Ethics asks, what's right, what's wrong? How should human beings live? What makes an action moral or immoral? It helps us to demarcate in human behavior what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, what's punishable, what's rewardable. And in this way, we can set up norms, tradition, culture, and beliefs that are based on proper reasoning. The next area of axiology is aesthetics. In aesthetics, we're interested in beauty. We can ask ourselves question: why do humans experience beauty? Is beauty really in the eye of beholder, or is beauty objective, out there? Everyone, when they look at beauty, they can agree something is beautiful. We could also ask ourselves, most people would prefer that beauty is in the eye of beholder. But if that's true, why do we hold beauty contests? Are beauty contests objective? Is there someone who really wins to be Miss Kenya, Miss Africa, or Miss World? That's an area of philosophy called aesthetics. And there we're interested in beauty. We also look at beauty from emotion and ask ourselves, why do certain things move us in a certain way? Why do we have a demarcation for some things that we think are ugly, and ugly things we don't want to look at them, and beautiful things we want to look at them? If beauty and ugliness are subjective, then why do we agree on certain people or certain things being beautiful? That is philosophy of axiology. Then the fourth branch of philosophy is called logic, my area of specialization, logic and mathematics. In logic, we're interested in the rules for correct reasoning. Logic studies how to reason correctly. And that means that while all of us can reason, you could be reasoning incorrectly, but we're interested in reasoning correctly. It turns out that if we reason correctly, there is no room for disagreement, because reality is one, at least according to metaphysics, and we only disagree because we reason about that reality in disparity. And that confusion in reasoning is what makes us disagree. So in logic, we ask ourselves, how do you distinguish a good argument from a bad one? A correct reasoning from incorrect reasoning? How could we avoid contradiction? Because in contradiction, something cannot be and not be at the same time. Something cannot be true and false at the same time. It turns out when you don't understand logic, you can find yourself in a situation where you think something is true and false at the same time. In some cases, you'd hear people say something that is true for me. That means you're leaving room for contradiction. Logic does not allow contradiction. Logic is also interested in how is your conversation structured? How are your premises, evidence, facts leading us to conclusion? That is assessing a conversation or assessing any writing or a speech from logic. Logic became the foundation of mathematics, computer science, law, and scientific reasoning itself. So in essence, if you do not understand logic, there's no way you can understand mathematics. Sometimes you can be really good in mathematics, calculation, but if you can't really think about the reasoning behind algebra, trigonometry, calculus, probability, then you haven't really understood mathematics. Computer science runs on logic. The algorithm is just logic. Law, the conversation that happens in court, the prosecution and the defense, the laying out of arguments, that is logic. Scientific reasoning, the scientific method itself, where it tells us that we have to make observation, tabulate that observation, analyze the observation, and then draw the general conclusion. Scientific method, it was just an improvement of logic. So to understand science, you need logic. This is why you should understand that philosophy is really important, because it gave us all other disciplines that we study. To study philosophy is to study the mother of all disciplines. Before physics became physics, it was called natural philosophy. People like Isaac Newton did not study physics. They studied natural philosophy. So, science emerged from philosophical questions about nature. Political science emerged from philosophical questions about justice and government and governance. Psychology emerged from philosophical questions about human mind and how it relates with the body. Sociology emerged from understanding that we could study human behavior as if they also had social facts and subject them to the same rules of scientific method, which is logic. So philosophy did not disappear when you moved into studying political science as an independent subject, sociology, history, archaeology, anthropology, physics, chemistry. It's just that we, as human beings, we live for a very short time, and therefore we needed to do division of labor. For some people to specialize in one subject and others to specialize in other subject, and collectively, therefore we are able to understand reality as one, but that is only if we come together as a collective that have studied all those subjects. That's why today there's emphasis on multidisciplinary studies, interdisciplinary studies, is trying to cure that specialization that made people to start thinking that if you studied sociology, the reality is sociology. If you study political science, you see reality from political science. As a matter of fact, if we lived for long, it's important that all of us actually understand all subjects. All of us are supposed to be experts, from home science to CRE to all the way to physics. You have a responsibility to know everything. So studying philosophy is not useless ancient activity. It's not just for asking questions or being disruptive in debate. It is the intellectual operating system behind or beneath civilization. It's the place where you ask, what is true? What is real? What's good? And what follows logically from that understanding? Anytime you do that, you're already studying or doing philosophy. And perhaps that explains something very important, those questions that I've just raised. And this, just to repeat, the important thing for you to understand here is that all kind of study we do is doing philosophy, and for that reason, any advanced degree offered by a university, the highest degree is a PhD, Doctor of Philosophy, because that is the highest level of knowledge in every discipline. And in every discipline at the highest level of knowledge, we all return to the same place where it all started, and that is in philosophy. So philosophy is deep thinking about reality, deep thinking about truth, about value, about reason, about how we get to know all these things. Therefore, to study philosophy is not to escape reality. It's actually to learn how to think about reality more carefully. And with that, I hope now you understand what philosophy is and you're really excited and looking forward to my videos on philosophical challenging ideas that I think everyone should know.